You are listening to Keith Price's Curtain Call.
The sun'll come out tomorrow. You bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow there'll be sun. Just thinking about tomorrow clears away the cobwebs and the sorrow till there's none. When I'm stuck with a day that's gray and lonely, I just stick out my chin and grin and say, oh, the sun'll come out tomorrow, so you gotta hang on till tomorrow, come what may.
Ooh, take me away, Andrea. Take me away. Tomorrow. There's always tomorrow. And again, you're thinking to yourself, really, Keith? What? Annie, what's wrong with you? What's going on with you? Well, I have a special treat for you today for the Curtain Call. We are very lucky because many people may know Andrea McArdle from Annie, and that's really great. But you also know that Annie had a friend named Sandy. And Sandy had to be trained to be Sandy. Is that correct? Yes, I believe that is correct. And you know who I'm sitting with? I'm sitting with world-renowned, shall we say now, award-winning, life-saving animal trainer, Mr. Bill Berloni. How are you, sir? Berloni. I make sure, not Baloney, Berloni. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And, you know, with a name like that, nobody forgets it.
No one forgets it. No one forgets it at all. But, oh, my God. So, you know, Bill is here with me because, again, like I always try to tell everyone who listens to the Curtain Call, that the world of theater is filled with so many other people besides just actors. I think that the big misnomer is that everyone thinks that it's just about the actors. It's like there's tons of people that are involved with the productions of shows that you may have heard about or love. There's costumers, there's set designers, there's wig people, there's all kinds of folks that are involved. And what's interesting is that when you see shows like Annie, or when you see shows like Legally Blonde, or if you see things like just recently this past season on The Crucible, there was a wolf on stage. Somebody has to wrangle those animals, and someone has to train those animals to be able to be ready to do what the other actors are doing 8 shows a week. And Bill is probably, as far as I know, like the only one that anyone ever talks about. So, Bill, first of all, thank you for being here with me here on the Curtain Call. And secondly, man, this started for you with Annie, and you were the first person to really train these animals like this to do what they needed to do. How did you get close enough to that whole, I'm sure you've told that story 1,000 times, but how did you get from being the 18, 19-year-old guy with the ability to train dogs? Where did that come from?
It's really one of those great backstage stories. When I was growing up, I wanted to be an actor. And instead of spending my summers in Connecticut at the beach, I decided to be around professionals. So I became an apprentice at the Goodspeed Opera House in East Haddam, Connecticut.
Right.
So I was a carpenter there my first season, working 80 hours a week for no money, loving it because all the New York actors came up. Mm-hmm. Second season, they decided to do the musical Annie, and there was a dog in it. And when they got to production meetings, they were like, well, we'll just hire a dog trainer out of New York. Well, they were very expensive. And then the producer said, well, I'll just have one of the crew do it. And they all threatened to quit. So he needed a sucker. And somehow my name came up, and I was called into executive producer Michael Price's office. He sat me down. Now, he hadn't talked to me in 2 years. I was an apprentice. Billy, sit down. He said, how you doing? You're doing great here. He said, and he knew I wanted to be an actor, and he said, how would you like a part in one of our shows and your equity card? Now, I'm 18 and a half years old.
Wow.
Thinking how brilliant that he recognizes my acting ability from the way I've been moving scenery. Oh, Mr. Price, that would be great. All you have to do, kid, is find and train the dog for no money. Okay. And I floated out of his office because I was going to become an equity actor at the Goodspeed Opera House. It wasn't until like the day later that I was like, what did I agree to? And the part was for no money.
Wow.
So literally he gave me $35 to find the dog and feed it all summer. Someone said they had cheap dogs at the animal shelter, and I went casting for a medium-sized dog of sandy color. Ended up at the Connecticut Humane Society and found a dog who was severely abused, who was going to be euthanized the next day. Being a kid who was raised with animals, I never knew that animals were in those situations. I was profoundly moved. I adopted Sandy and decided I could train this dog. I mean, I had dogs growing up. They always followed me around. They were my companions because they loved me and I treated them well. So I thought if I can make the dog think that the theater's his home and Annie's his friend, maybe he'll go out on stage, which is exactly what I did. And he would come to me at the theater. He'd hang out at the shop. And fortunately, my first training assignment was with a child because the first day I met Kristen Vigard, who was the original Annie, she said, "What are we going to do?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Let's play." And that wonderful thing that happens between kids and dogs started happening. And, you know, Sandy fell in love with this little girl who'd played with him every night. So when we got to the wings of the first performance, he wasn't forced to go out there. He was walking out 10 feet to see his friend. And that sort of was the beginning of this positive method of reinforcement training. Now, the interesting thing was that there had never been an animal to play a character in a live theatrical event. Animals up until then had been props. They can be walked on, walked off in a leash, cut from Oliver if you have to. But, you know, no one said to Martin Charnin, Charles Strauss, and Tom Meehan and I, "You can't do this." And I trained a dog to play a character. I mean, the story depended on him doing the same thing every night. And we made a cast change. Andrea McCardle took over 3 weeks later. 7 months later, we were opening at the Kennedy Center, and in April of 1977, Annie opened on Broadway, and I became a world-famous animal trainer.
Wow.
So, still thinking I wanted to be an actor.
Hey, but you have your equity card.
I did. I was taking classes during the day, and then there were national touring companies, and the next thing I knew, I had 10 Sandys, and then I was called for other Broadway shows, and probably within 4 years of Annie opening, I realized I was much more talented at rescuing dogs and turning them into characters than I was at being a character myself.
Wow. Wow. Bill Berloni with me here on the Curtain Call. That takes an amount of, I mean, you really have to get past your ego to be able to do that.
You know, Sandy worked, and then the first time I had to train another dog, I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? I to this day, how am I going to get a wolf on stage? I wake up with those fears every day. And
that's the panic of the animal
That's the panic,
trainer.
and I feel like the minute my ego does check in and is probably the time I'll be done. You know, it's like when it becomes easy, you know, I'll be done.
Wow, Bill Berloni with me here. I find it so wonderful because you clearly have, as you said before, you loved animals all your life. Like that's how you basically came into this world, with a love for animals, and you've managed to translate that not only into an art form, because it is, to take care of an animal well, it really is an art form. Don't you believe that?
It's a lot of work. And again, I was raised as an only child on a farm. So my dog and my cat, growing up until I went to kindergarten, they were my brothers and sisters. I didn't know that they were animals and pets. So I've grown up with this appreciation of nature and respecting nature and animals. And that's what I called upon when I got this assignment. And I continue to do that. And I try to educate people. So, you know, when I did come to New York, I went to NYU. I studied with Stella Adler. I mean, I had some theater background. And it was like, how do I take what the requirements of the theater are and make them match what animals can do? Because we never force our animals to work.
That's interesting that you saw that need to be able to take what you know and being able to apply that. How difficult is it to do that? Because, I mean, it's not like you telling me that I need to, you know, do more research on the character and, you know, think about how I would fit into that scene. Like, you know, those things that you do as training an actor. How do you do that with animals?
The animals are the easy part. Training the writers and the directors and the stars. Oh my goodness. I mean, because literally nature has limitations.
Right.
And a writer can write some fantastic scene. And then it'll be like, do you know why you've never seen that on stage? Because it's impossible. So what is your intent and how? This is what I could get you 8 times a week.
Right.
Now, when I work on films, it's you can do so much more. You can with camera angles and camera tricks and CGI.
Right.
But on stage, there are limitations, and so I have to work with directors who are collaborative enough to take what a dog trainer says and meet somewhere in the middle to find their vision,
or at least respect it.
Yeah, I mean that's the harder part, and especially when you're 22 years old, you know. And my second show was Camelot with Alan J. Lerner directed it, and he was like, "I want the dog to do this." I'm like, "Mr. Lerner, I don't think he can."
Sorry.
And we would try it his way and it wouldn't work, and we tried my way and it worked. I mean, but that's how I started, you know.
Wow. I mean, how insane was that for you to be able to say to someone, you know, to Alan Lerner, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. I mean, because you're right, at 22, and someone who studied the theater, knowing who you're talking to, that is daunting as hell, isn't it?
Yes, and it's those decisions that a performer or an artist makes that knows may end their career. But in my case, I'm doing it for my animal's welfare. So there was never a question as to my why. Because anytime an animal's stressed or confused, they won't perform, you know. But if it's fun for them and it's clear, they will perform 8 times a week. And I had proven that. So that's the harder part. But to this day, there are directors who are like, "Who are you, the dog trainer?" And there are directors like Susan Stroman that says, "Tell me how we do this," you know, and are very collaborative.
Oh man, I just love that. Susan Stroman, love her.
Yes,
let's love that woman. I love her to death. So for you now, you're also parlaying a lot of this love and care that you have for animals into your work that you do for the Humane Society as well. And for you, it's more than just teaching them how to pick balls up on a stage. It's about keeping them alive and keeping them healthy and keeping them well and treating them well. Have you found that work is just as exhausting and just as tiring to do as training an animal? I mean, because you're trying to train people.
Yes. No. Currently, my wife and I have 31 dogs that live in our house with us.
Wow.
It takes us and 2 full-time people to care for all those animals, and not just feed them, walk them, but to socialize them, to keep them happy, to medicate them, to groom them. And it is, it's that bucolic, life on a farm, it's so easy. No, it's not. Not when you have livestock. You don't get vacations. Someone is vomiting in the middle of the night, inevitably.
It's like having children.
Yes, except 31 of them,
Now, do you have kids?
Yes, I have a daughter.
Okay.
And but keeping them healthy and happy in New York City to perform, they have to be like Olympic athletes. That they really have to be calm, rested, and the best part of their day has to be between half hour and curtain.
Right.
So walk like I just finished The Crucible.
Right.
Walking a wolf through Times Square was always harrowing because people would scream and run and scare the poor dog. I would have to walk all the way over to 6th Avenue, up to 50th. I'd have to completely avoid, instead of going 3 blocks, from my parking garage to the theater. But I walked the 6 blocks so that the dog wouldn't get scared.
Wow. So when you're doing something like The Crucible, or when you're doing Annie, or you're there every day with the dogs. So you're at half hour like everybody else is at half hour. Yes.
My gift now is being able to find the right animal for the role, work with the director, figure out how to make it happen. And once the show is set, I usually move on to designing the next show and put one of my trainers in.
Oh.
So in The Crucible, the dog was so in love with me that when I tried to leave, he fell apart. And knowing it was a limited 6-month run, I decided just to make it easy on him and stay here. But yeah, usually I can put it together, then put somebody in and move on.
Wow.
Because they all come, when the run's over, they all come home. So it's not like...
So you have all of these animals at your house that you've trained?
Yes.
Wow.
We have 4 Sandys, 7 Totos, 3 Bruisers from Legally Blonde, 4 Bumpus Hounds from A Christmas Story. I mean, we have this cachet of unemployed actors who do stock and tours.
I love it. So do they have their headshots that you send out for them if they
Yes.
need work?
And then sometimes, like, I'll get them a role on Mr. Robot. One of
Yeah.
our Totos is on Mr. Robot. You know, I mean, so we
that's
get them other
hilarious.
roles.
That's so funny. So not only are you taking care of them, you're also their agent.
Yes. Oh, very much so. They've got to pay for each other. You know.
We got to pay for the farm.
I know.
How funny. And then, like, they're all working as a collective. That's
Yes.
kind of cool.
Yep,
That is
supporting
so
each other.
groovy.
Yep.
Wow. So tell me about your work at the Humane Society. What is your role there?
When I started out with Sandy originally, I volunteered to do press for all the animal shelters, try to help the animal welfare movement. And the Humane Society of New York called me like 20 years ago and said, would you come over and just like look at some of our dogs? And I was like, listen, I'm just a theater guy. No, just come on over. So I would go over and temperament test dogs and give them training tips as a consultant because they couldn't afford a full-time animal trainer. And literally that was 21 years ago, and I have remained their consultant. So I'm their director of animal behavior. I will meet the new dogs coming in. I'll set up training programs. And I can do that in between my theater schedule and movie schedule.
Right.
So I'm their ambassador. I'm their go-to person. And so it humbles me to be able to walk into a building where nobody knows I'm in theater and be able to help animals and people here in New York City who have real problems, you know.
Wow.
Whether they were giving up their dog or helping them find the new love of their life. So that just keeps my skills as a trainer honed, you know, and makes me feel like I'm giving something back to the community.
Wow. Wow. Bill Berloni with me here on the Curtain Call. And again, what an amazing way to spend your life, don't you think? I marvel at that because, again, I love pets, but I always feel so bad for pets, especially because right now we have two in studio with us right now. Birdie, who is going
Bodie.
I'm sorry, who is going to be, he's looking up, is going to be, he was just cast, or he's been cast.
He's been cast.
In a show called
Because of Winn Dixie.
Because of Winn Dixie, the grocery store
Yes.
from Texas.
It's a new musical that my wife and I are producing.
Oh, wow.
Score by Duncan Sheik.
Oh, God, I love him.
Book and lyrics by Nell Benjamin of Legally Blonde. And we've had 2 out-of-town tryouts. We have our 3rd out-of-town tryout coming up, and John Rando is our director. So,
Man.
yeah, so, you know, literally 10 years ago, I was complaining to my wife, like, when are they going to do Lassie the musical so I can train a star dog? None of these little bit parts. We're above the title.
There's no small parts. Remember that.
And she turned to me, my wife, Dorothy, who is a theater professional. She said, well, let's do it ourselves. I'm like, yeah, you and I are going to produce a Broadway show, right? And you never say that to an Italian-Irish woman.
Uh-oh.
Because she went out and she got the rights to this wonderful children's book called Because of Winn Dixie by Kate DiCamello. She got Duncan Sheik to sign on. She got Nell Benjamin to sign on. And,
Wow.
you know, we are hopefully one step away from opening on Broadway next year.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's the first
Wow.
musical about the human-animal bond that stars a live dog. So it's Sylvia with a real dog, which has never been done before.
Wow.
So we think it's very exciting.
Wow. Well, that must be a very difficult training experience for the dog because you're basically taking a dog through an entire journey of an arc of a character.
For example, in Annie, Sandy has 14 cues, and he's only on stage 11 and a half minutes.
Right.
Bodie had 102 cues in our last production, and it was on stage 70 of our 90 minutes.
Wow.
Now, it's taken me 40 years to figure out how to do that. But I think when people come to see this, you're not going to see some big overproduced Disney extravaganza. You're going to see the story about real people and how they interact with animals. And I think it's going to be very moving.
Wow. Now, does he have a number?
He has doesn't sing very well, doesn't dance very well, but he gives good face.
Good. Well, that's what's important.
Yeah.
How funny. I love that. So now with something like this now, because we're talking about theater and we're talking about like the business of theater, it's like, do you have an understudy?
Yes. I mean, the funny story was when I got the original Sandy and they asked me to come to Broadway, the first meeting we had with general managers, all of 19 and a half. They were like, what about the understudy? I was like, oh, I'll work with the understudy. They were like, no, understudy dog. What if the dog gets sick? I'm like, oh, yeah, what if the dog gets sick?
I didn't think of that.
So I went to the pound and adopted another one. But it's true. I mean, we all have the right to get sick. So we always have to have a backup who's ready to go on at any minute.
Wow. That must be kind of hard, though, to train both of them to do the same thing and them having to work with the actor months and months or so after, if they've had the opportunity to do the full rehearsal with them and then not be able to do it for a long period of time.
Well, I'll share my secret just between you and I.
Okay.
What we do is we take the understudy dog and work with the understudy actors. So, we get the stage time, we get the routine, we get the blocking. So the dog knows the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
It won't have the same bond that the real pair may have, but in an emergency, you put some roast beef in somebody's pocket, and these dogs will follow you anywhere.
Sounds like a Saturday night. Hey.
So no, that's how we keep the understudy dogs up to speed.
Wow.
And stage ready.
That's
Makes total common sense, though.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's common sense,
Well, I mean, because again, that's basically how theater works.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like there is the understudy and the standby and all that jazz that goes on, and it is important. Like, so even for like when you did the Crucible, did you have a standby wolf?
We did not. That was one where the producers were aware that if some force majeure made our dog sick, that dog was so rare. There were only 1,000 in the world, and I was only able to borrow one. We would have to go without the animal.
Yeah.
But everything else, oh yeah.
Wow, that's kind of fascinating, though. I mean,
And then the best part is you get a hit show. You get Legally Blonde. So I train a Broadway bruiser and a Broadway understudy. First National opens. I take the Broadway bruiser, send him out on the First National, and train a new one to be an understudy. So it's just like theater, you know?
Wow. I mean, it's good to know that as the life of an actor. I mean, you're facilitating the life of an actor. And I guess because, the lifespan tends to be a little bit shorter in all of these animals, you're really giving them a career.
Well,
That's fantastic.
Dogs, particularly, who I only train domesticated animals. When I started my career, I found that training wild animals was very cruel and inhumane, and the methods were not nice. So I will do domestic animals, dogs being 99.2% of what we train, because they're social creatures. They choose to want to hang out with man.
Right.
And the more they hang out with us, with people, and come to a friendly situation, the happier they are. So they love to work.
So what other animals do you have besides dogs? I mean, you mentioned it earlier, and I feel like I just went blank. But you have cats as
31 dogs, 3 cats, 2 horses, a donkey, 2 pigs, and a macaw currently.
And they're all unemployed.
They're all unemployed. Yeah.
It's hard for a horse to get work these days, isn't it?
Yes, they're all unemployed. Oh my God, this week we have nobody working. I mean, I'm doing some film work, but there's no shows running.
The show's running. I love that because you have to be conscious of that stuff.
Yes, we do.
Wow, Bill. So now with Winn Dixie coming as part of your thing, what else are you working on? What are the things you're doing?
We're for the fall of 2016, we'll be training the dogs for the national tour of Finding Neverland.
Right.
The national tour of Annie.
And that's the other wonderful pet that's here, Sammy.
The national tour of Annie will go back out in September. The national tour of The Wizard of Oz will go back out in October. So we'll have 3 tours. And then I'm basically keeping myself free because of Winn Dixie in January.
Wow. Now, with the time frame between the last out-of-town tryout and the next out-of-town tryout, which is going to be where? Can we tell? Because I want people to go see it.
The Alabama Shakespeare Festival. We're going to open the second week of January.
Of 2017.
Correct.
Wow. So then between now and 2017, how do you keep him remembering all of his movement and his part?
When they come home to the farm, they're just dogs. We let them run around in the yard. We don't work them every day. Once they've learned to listen to you, that's the hard part of training. Teaching them what to do is easy, but gaining a dog's respect and love is the hard part. And once you've done that, they will follow you anywhere. But I mean, Bodie hasn't been, sitting around. He filmed an episode of High Maintenance for HBO, which is going to be one heck of a episode. He is a new character on Sesame Street. He plays Bill Irwin's dog, Bill Irwin plays a character named Mr. Noodle, and now Mr. Noodle has a dog named Schnoodle. So he filmed 8 episodes of Sesame Street.
Wow.
So again, these dogs can come out and do a lot of other things, and they love it. So
now when they're doing these kinds of things, are they getting scale or are they getting more than scale? Do you negotiate that as well? Listen to me, I'm being all nosy.
No. I negotiate that, and it comes around to a good point. There are no unions that represent animal trainers.
Right.
There are no laws protecting animals in entertainment. So it's the Wild West, and historically, animals have been considered props, inanimate things that the prop department handles. So, when Annie opened, Sandy was obviously a star, so I was able to negotiate a good deal for him. But for most of my career, it's been trying to raise awareness that, animals are not just things that you rent for a day, and you should not hire the lowest bidder. You should not hire the trainer who is the lowest bidder because they're the least experienced.
Right.
And that's where a lot of problem happens. So, we have to make enough to pay for an apartment here in New York.
Right.
We have to pay enough to have a car because you can't take these guys on the subway. So having a car in New York City with an uptown and a midtown parking garage,
good God.
Paying someone, a decent wage to work on Broadway here in New York City.
Right.
I mean, $1,000 a week is not a lot of money to live in New York City.
It isn't.
So when you
really
factor
isn't.
all that stuff in, and the $30,000 we pay in insurance every year for these, I mean, we come up with a fee and a profit margin. So for Broadway, that can afford it. And television, movies, I only take the ones that can afford to pay us, but because historically it will go to the lowest bidder, and most of the times I can't afford to work for $250 a day on a network TV show.
Absolutely not.
And my favorite story is I did a commercial about 10 years ago for Purina Dog Chow. Golden Retriever had to run around the backyard, come in, eat from bowl A, not like it, the product shot, and then he eats from bowl B, which is Purina, and with the little boy hugging him. I made $500 for the starring dog, and the kid made $20,000 a year in residuals.
Wow.
So, it's like, is that fair?
Wow. I'm sure the kid thinks it's fair.
Yeah, and I did it because I wanted to make friends with Purina.
Right.
But again, unlike actors who have minimums with unions, there are no laws protecting animals or standards.
Wow. So do you think that that's something that you, with the work that you do, can change? Is that something you're working on as well?
I am working on it, and it's been a conscious choice of my 40th anniversary in the business, because whenever you start making waves, there's going to be some producers who are going to not want to have to change.
Of course not.
But at this point, there's I just feel like some standardization should happen for animal welfare. And currently, there is a group called the American Humane Association who does the film work. They they will come to set, they will watch, and they can give a seal that says no animals have been harmed in this film.
Which, if you sit through the credits, you can see. Yeah.
I'm trying to work with them to see if we can involve, but unfortunately, because Broadway rehearses for 8 weeks and there's previews, and they can't send a representative to sit around all that whole period. But having a group that trainers can turn to and say, will you intervene on my behalf? Because I've said no to some producers and directors and lost a job.
Wow.
Because I feel what's been asked of me is inhumane. So to have, on sets, having the American Humane Association to back me up protects me as a person.
As a trainer.
But
I mean, the thing for that, it seems like it shouldn't be that big of a thing in the big picture, because you're only asking for one person to be there for an extended period of time on a set. And there's movies. I mean, I'm sure that that's a big enough organization where they can follow movies, they follow the TV shows, they follow all of those other things without any question. So
actually, they're not that big. They are a big organization, but when you consider that there are probably 5,000 or 6,000 filmings going on in this country per day, and they only have 100 staff members.
Right.
They can't go to them all.
Right.
And theater would be more time consuming and less lucrative for them. So that's the curmudgeon. But I'm hoping to get together a group of the Humane Society of New York, American Humane Association, some producers, some celebrities like Bernadette Peters, my friend,
Oh,
and just
love
come up
her.
with a code of ethics for how to treat animals.
Right.
I mean, I used to have to negotiate money for a dressing room. Now, a dog doesn't need a dressing room. A dog needs a quiet place to sleep
Right.
where nobody's stepping over it, nobody's bothering it, there's no toxic chemicals.
And no sets flying
Right.
over them. Yeah.
And I used to have to trade dollars to get a dressing room. I mean, now after so many decades, people will expect to do that. But younger trainers starting out have to negotiate dollars to get a quiet place for their animals to rest, and that shouldn't be.
Wow. Well, you have a lot of work on your hands, Mr.
I do.
Berloni. You just got to get cracking, man. This it's like this training the dog thing is not enough. You got a lot of stuff to do here.
Well, I've got to save all the dogs in entertainment and all the dogs in New York City. So
Yeah.
and earn a living. No, but what's great about theater, is our community feeling. We met at a benefit for
Yeah.
Broadway Barks
Yeah.
at 54 Below. And you have people like Seth Rudetsky, creating albums for, Orlando. And all our colleagues have, so many different wonderful charities, and we all support each other in our
Right.
causes because we care. We're
Yeah.
a caring community.
Well, then you know what? That's what needs to happen next. We need to call Van Dean over at Broadway Records. I have a number, and we need to do an album. There's all of these great Broadway stars that would do it. I mean, we were just talking about like Karen Ziemba earlier. It's like those are artists that would do it. Bernadette Peters would love to do it. I'm sure she would do it if she hasn't already done it now, and raise money and raise awareness in a really great way.
Right.
I would help promote that. Are you
Yep.
kidding? That was just a chance to meet Bernadette Peters. Shut up. I'm sorry. This is about me, but still, she knows I love her.
Yep.
I hope. It would be really a great thing to see because, again, if it's about bringing awareness, that's one of those things that will happen. And, excuse me, on a national level, I think it would be really exciting to see that happen so that other places, other the regional theaters that have really great spaces and really great performers and really great, like they would love to be a part of something like that.
Well, and when I look back at my career, you always say, has anything changed? And I can point to positive changes. When I started out, Sandy, big thing was Sandy was a rescue dog.
Wow.
Now most trainers only use rescue dogs. The public is starting to rescue dogs. For years, whenever we play a town or a city, I would do a benefit for a local animal shelter. I would invite them to come and set up in the lobby and bring some dogs for adoption. Now it's pretty much standard in the theaters of all our tours go to. The press people are sending it out there saying, do this. It's great for the community.
Wow.
So, those sort of things make me feel like I'm making some sort of change in the welfare. And I just saw Seth Rudetsky last week, and he was like, we were talking about an animal welfare issue, and he was like, Bill, why isn't people more informed about animal abuse? I'm like, I said, look at what you're doing in terms of inclusion and treating each other well.
Yeah.
I said, we're becoming more actualized as a society because the more we treat each other well, it'll trickle down to how we treat animals. And I never thought I would live to see an Afro-American president. I never thought I would live to see gay marriage, and I never thought I'd live to see a woman president. So I believe we're going in the right direction, and I'm waiting for animals to just be included in that.
Oh, wow. Well, Bill, thank you so much for spending time with me and helping educate me a little bit about what goes on. And at the same time, if people are listening to this that want to help, where should they go?
Okay, this is my other suggestion. There are many national groups that are helping on certain legislative issues and all that sort of stuff. I say to people, they'll go, oh, well, I can't do what Bill does. Yes, you can. If you can contribute $5 to your local shelter in your community, or even better, volunteer in some way. People are like, I can't go in the shelter. It's so depressing. Donate old towels for the kennels. Donate old sheets. Go in and help with social media. Go help them at a publicity event. Go in and pet the kitties. I mean, there are so many ways you can volunteer without actually having to clean cages that will help your local animal shelters and make you feel good and keep it in the community. That would be my suggestion. There's so many great shelters here in New York City, and we still have 30,000 cats and dogs being euthanized every year. Wow. So, donate locally, volunteer locally.
I love that. I love that. That's just amazing. And again, and all of those religious zealots out there that are going on, it's sort of like if you're really reading your Bible, you know as humans, you're supposed to be the ones taking care of the animals. So if you're going to do something, you're going to talk about what God is telling you to do, I believe he's told you to do that, and y'all aren't really taking advantage of that either. So,
Yes.
Gosh, man. Well, God, Bill, so when you come back, because definitely you're going to come back.
Yes.
You have an open invitation to come here anytime you want to talk about anything that you want to talk about. I want to find out more about the show when it's coming up. When you're getting closer to going to Alabama, come back and let's talk about it, because I know that there's people in Alabama somewhere that's listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for the work that you're doing, and not only keeping some of us entertained by bringing these animals here, but by helping take care of them too, because that's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and it makes you a very beautiful person.
Wow.
So
I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I've been playing with animals for 40 years and getting away with it. So I
wow. So
they rescued me.
They rescued you. Yes. And again, so for more information about all of the work that Bill does, please go to theatricalanimals.com, and you will see, first of all, I got to say, and this is just going to be me, I'm sure you get this a lot from the Chorus Boys, but you got it going on, Daddy. That's all I'm going to say. And also get your books, too, because you have books. There's this last book that you have, The Heartfelt Stories of Rescue Dogs Who Became Showbiz Superstars.
Broadway Tales.
It's fantastic. Fantastic. So
just don't read it in public. It's an autobiography of all the dogs.
You make it sound so dirty. Don't read it in public.
No. It's an autobiography of all the dogs I've. Each chapter is a Broadway show. It's in chronological order.
Oh, wow.
And people have got it, and some of the stories don't start out so well, and they've been on the subway reading, and they start crying.
Oh.
And they're like, why didn't you tell me that was so sad? But it had a happy ending. It had a nappy. Each chapter has it. So that's what I mean by
So don't read it on the subway because it gets sad. And also your other book, Doga,
yes,
which is your dog yoga, and then of course Sandy, the autobiography of a star. Okay. So again, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thanks for inviting me.
I hope that anybody that's listening to this is taking something away from that, and if anything else, you're going to go out and treat animals better. Because they're really your friends. Every time I see somebody with a hunting picture, I want to scream.
And bringing it back to how you opened this, there are so many people who are in the arts who aren't on stage, you know, and I was fortunate enough to have a skill, and it made me unique, and I was able to turn it into a career. So, I always tell college kids, don't try and be someone else, be yourself, whatever that may be.
Look at that. Oh, all right. Well, we are out. This is going to be great. Thank you so much, Bill. And don't forget theatricalanimals.com to find out more about what he's doing and who's going on with what. Get his books, see the films, see the movies, and plan on seeing if you're in Alabama. We've got
Because of Winn Dixie.
Because of Winn Dixie coming. So thank you.